Recording in progress. Okay, so listen, we've got a lot to cover this morning. Our first 3 trainings this year was to dissect the standard REPC into 3 different areas. I hope that was helpful. We got a lot of good comments about that. And today is going to be a little bit of an extension on that. I hope it doesn't bore you. Let me ask you this. If you were to venture a guess, in our current market makeup of properties available for sale and those that do sale, what percentage of them are new construction? And this is where you participate. Yeah, throw out a number.
40%.
Deborah, you said 40%. Parker?
I said a third of our market.
Third.
I'd say 30.
30%. Okay. All right. Well,
I think historically it's around a quarter to a third, but I think it's a little higher in today's market.
You are all correct. And then my favorite answer is going to be, it depends on the geography that you're in currently, right? So if I go over to Vineyard in Utah County, I don't know, 90% new construction, or Lehigh, or pick your exploding area, and you'll see that there's a lot of high density new construction because of affordability issues. I'm going to just quickly share my screen here. Quickly being a relative term. Okay, so this is from the Federal Reserve, right? So this is decent data. This is new houses sold by stage of construction total. So you can see historically what it's been. And you look as recently as COVID, it was close to 1 million homes. What is the amount of homes we need to create each year, roughly, to stay up with population growth?
I think it's 4 million, isn't it?
You had the number kind of correct. There was a 4 in it. It was 1.4 to 1.5 million households per year. So if in a strong year, we're sitting at close to 1 million, you're sitting there at, 2/3. Now, that's not the case for us now, and it has definitely tamped down. So we're sitting at about that third mark, maybe a little more, 30, 35%. My point is, it's a big freaking number. Okay. Parker, you're muted.
Sorry. That's 1.4 million new construction every year to keep up with demand, or is that just 1.4 million new listings?
No, new homes created for new household creation.
Got it.
Kind of a important thing. And I'm also going to just quickly advocate. Remember, so if you're at utahrealestate.com, and you go over to statistics and click on rapid stats, that will bring up this screen. And by the way, I just went to, if you go to the dashboard, come down to market summary, do a monthly housing summary. Shame on you if you have not created a calendar item on your Google Calendar for the beginning of every month. The good news is March 1st is right around the corner. So everybody commit today to go in and give yourself a task recurring every month to come into rapid stats. Now, how many clicks was that? 1 click from the MLS, 2 clicked on market summary over here on the left. That's 2 clicks. And then the third one is the market housing summary. Okay. I always ask agents, what are you prepared to say when one of your clients, your SOI, somebody in the supermarket, gas, whatever, says, hey, how's the market? Is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to sell? Are you prepared? You damn well better be. And that's right. I swore on my own recording. So this is how easy it is, you guys. 3 clicks, and I have pretty dang good information. Look right here, right? Median sales price. Please don't ever use average. Average is vulnerable to statistical outliers. It's less meaningful data. Always use median. But if you look at a year ago, January of 2023, median sales price was 510. The blue one is we're 535. We've gone up 25,000. Do you think the market understands do you think the public understands what the market's doing? I don't think they do. And why? Why has it gone up to 535? I don't know. Maybe rates have come back, and therefore there's more people competing now, and it's starting to drive up prices. Anyway, tons of great data. It even breaks it down over here by price category. One of the strongest growing areas is the 500 to 700,000. Anyway, just a reminder, 3 clicks, and you've got all kinds of data to show people how smart you are and why they should be using you. Okay, now that we've established that new construction is a big deal and is a big part of our portfolio, I wanted to what do you think most agents' perception is of new construction? And I'm trying to set you up on this, right? When you get new construction, what's your reaction? You're like, oh man, that's going to be a lot of work. Or is it more in the category of, it's new construction, builder's going to take care of everything? Come on, be honest. Which one is? If it's the latter, like, oh, good, new construction. I want you on screen. Turn on your video. Come on, everybody, turn on your video, and give me a hand raise. And there's no wrong answer. All of you that didn't raise your hand are kind of lying. I'm not saying that's right, but
I'm sorry, what do you want to raise our hands about? Which question?
when you do new construction, when you get somebody under contract, let's say with Edge Homes for one of their 500 condos that they're building in Lehigh, do you sit there and go, oh, whew, this is going to be a lot of work? Or do you be like, oh man, that's easy money. I'm going to put them in the queue. I'm going to sign up the contract. And I can go on and maybe get 3 or 4 of these lined up, and it's really not going to take much time. Do you have some version of that mentality? Raise your hand. You're not raising your hand.
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Easy money.
I saw Jen Bellison shaking her head no. That's because she's an exceptional agent. Why not, Jen? Give me a 20-second overview of why you don't agree with that.
Because they're human and they make mistakes. So if you don't stay on top of it, just like any other transaction, something will inevitably go wrong.
Okay, nice. And so,
Matt, I think it should be mentioned too. I think in part of our service, and Jen, you'd probably agree with me, reading those contracts, because a lot of builders use their own contracts. So reading those contracts before we advise our clients to sign them is a really big deal, and highlighting those important parts that say, oh, hey, there's liability here, there's liability there. I think that goes a long way in showing them that we're willing to work for them, but also then explaining to them, after you sign this contract, the builder's going to do this and this and this, and we'll be on top of it for you, but really the builder's in control. You need to understand that.
Great points by both Parker and Jen. I would say it this way if I was going to have to wrap it up in a very succinct statement. 1, your fiduciary of reasonable care is a real thing. I hope if you've been on enough of these calls, this, like, anytime I say fiduciary, you automatically think, oh, Barton says that's a legal responsibility, because that's what a fiduciary is. It is a legal responsibility that holds up in court, right? And the second part of it is demonstrating our value as an agent, right? Now, if you're not paying attention to what's going on nationally, and this is kind of a byproduct of all the discussions about the lawsuits and agents and do they really earn their money? Well, we're sometimes our own worst enemy. So let's all go back to the question I asked. Oh yeah, it's going to be easy money. We just put them in a queue and we let Edge take care of them. Now, I'm not saying it's that extreme, but if there's some version of that, 1, I think you're missing an opportunity to secure a client for life, right? People, it doesn't matter if it's part of a somewhat automated process. People still want to feel like you're paying attention to them and care about them in their large transaction, right? And if you just kick it over the fence and say, well, Edge will take care of them, on that front alone, you're missing an opportunity. Now, Parker, you brought something up, and this is a perfect segue for what I wanted to cover. Now, do most builders use the state's new construction REPC, or do they use some version of their own?
Their own.
So why in the world would I train you on this? Everybody's like, hell if I know.
I think it's important to understand, because look, those contracts are like sometimes 25, 35 pages long, and like 17 of those pages are liabilities. So to be able to understand how the state contract reads, which is a really important contract that like a ton of attorneys have already reviewed and said, yeah,
wait, stop right
we
there.
deem this acceptable.
Stop right there. They've reviewed, or were you going to say plagiarized?
Okay, all right. What's
You
the
know,
difference?
yeah. Tomato, tomato. No, you're right. And that's the basic premise, guys, is if you understand our state's new construction REPC, then you're very well equipped to do a compare and a contrast. Here's the state's new construction REPC. Here's what the builder's trying to do. And if you are familiar enough in the big chunks we're going to cover today, you can look for those same things, what is either there and augmented in a builder's contract or that are conspicuously missing in a builder's contract. So that's why we're going to use this. I don't have the time, nor do you, to go through 30 different builders contracts, but they're all going to have some similar components to what is in the new construction REPC. So my hope today is that you'll pay attention to the main chunks, the main sections that we cover that have ramifications. And that way you're pretty good, Parker, to your point. Yeah, actually read the contract before you go in and sit down. Have the builder or the builder's agent send you a copy so you can sit down. You're going to have this marked up copy because, of course, anybody who wants this and sends me an email, I will send you my marked up copy. How easy can I make it for you guys? And I still have like 2 people, D, you're one of them, that is smart and filing these away so that it can build to your repertoire of knowledge. So, all right, let's jump into this, guys. So in the new construction REPC, I'm going to try and point out rapidly the things that are similar between a regular REPC, and we're not going to spend a lot of time there, but hopefully more time spent on the parts that are different and unique, and you should pay attention. So first section in green, I put in section on my notes here. The green sections are predominantly financial. They have financial consequences, right? And so let's go through the green section first. There's a couple of parts to it, so I'm going to bounce around a little bit. So the first one obviously is earnest money. This is no different than a standard REPC. Has the same time frames. You have 4 calendar days to get it to the company after acceptance. I had somebody the other day going, wait, I thought it was after the offer date. Nope, it's after acceptance, remember. And then the company has 4 days to get it into the real estate brokerage trust. Buyers or sellers? Whose trust does it go into?
Either.
There you go, Bill. Bill's been paying attention. There is no requirement for it to be at the buyer's brokerage. Tends to go there a lot, but it doesn't have to. What if a builder wants you to hold earnest money at a title company, and almost always when they make that request, it's somebody that they have an affiliation with, a title company they have affiliation with? Should we be concerned? There's the question.
Yes.
Why? Giselle. Hey, Giselle.
So,
What's up? Why would you be concerned?
well, I'll tell you why is crucial, or why I just learned it was crucial. The last deal that I did, which happened to be my son's, it had right in the contract that we had to use their title company, and also that the buyer had to pay for the seller's title fees, all of them. So they like to pull little stunts like that. So that's something you should pay attention to. And they usually, I mean, granted, they had a discounted rate that they were offering, but it wasn't that much different than if we would have just gone with any other title company. But title companies is another way for the builders to augment or to offset their little incentives that say, oh, we'll give you $5,000 towards closing costs, but you have to pay our $2,000 in or $3,000 in title fees. So they like to be in control of how the
say that word again. They like to what?
Be in control.
There you go. Those are the magic words. We want power, leverage, and control. That's what a builder is a lot of times looking for. And so, good point. And I'll piggyback off Parker's comment. That's why you read the contract. And Giselle bringing those points out are awesome. Now, I've had a lot of agents, going to go down a quick tangent here. Can the builder require you to close at their title company, whether earnest money is there or not? Can
Absolutely.
Absolutely?
Yeah, because if you don't do it, they cannot do the deal. That's the thing about new construction and HUD and all that stuff. It's like they set up their rules.
All right.
By their rules, or you don't play.
So no, legally,
what I
they
love about
cannot
this.
require you to close at their title companies, but they'll do everything in their contractual power to try to get you to.
Yeah. So you guys, this is such great discussion. And Bill, I
No,
love
mean,
the
look,
fact.
look at a HUD home. If you don't close with their title company, you're not closing. It's end of, there's no debate. There's
Yeah.
no it's just the way it is.
Well, so what I wanted to hit on, and I'm glad you brought that up, Bill and Jen, your comments are spot on as well. Listen, at a starting point, no, they can't require you, but Bill's pragmatic approach is, yeah, well, they have some leverage. But here's the kicker. If they are not providing some advantage to you, like, oh, if you use our title company or our lender, you'll get free granite counters or quartz counter. The minute you agree to the spiff or your client agrees to the spiff, they absolutely can require it, right? If they're not offering anything, and this is going to contradict Bill just a titch, if they're not offering anything, if there's no incentives, then RESPA Section 9 says they cannot require, even if it's in a contract, just because it goes into a contract doesn't mean it doesn't have regulatory consequences. It's a violation of RESPA Section 9. So just remember that. Most of the cases, why do people use the builder's lender and title? I get free landscaping, I get quartz counters, I get washer and dry, whatever. As soon as you take the bait, all bets are off. Okay, so just remember that. Don't want to spend too much time on that today. All right. So, Carrie, comment? Okay. Purchase price. Now, I highlighted this for a reason. Remember, green section, we're talking about money. Purchase price. Please, 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 please remember when you're doing addenda or when you're receiving an addenda from the other side. If they say sales price, what should you do? Correct it. This is a proper term of the contract. There is no such thing as sales price. I mean, we can all assume what it means, but when they define in a contract the purchase price, then please reference purchase price. Just a little side note there. Now, here is a unique portion to the new construction REPC, construction deposit. Okay. When we get down to defaults, if a buyer does not perform, and we'll hit this in a little more detail, the builder in the contract, as a sole remedy, the builder can take the earnest money and construction deposits. Okay, just remember that. I've had people like, well, we'll just give them our earnest money. I'm like, well, first of all, not your choice. Secondly, it's not just the earnest money, it's earnest money and all construction deposits. So when you've worked with builders in the past and you want to do upgrades, well, we wanted the raised panel, nice cabinets with a good hardware and all that stuff, and great flooring, and we want the fireplace and all those things. Builders typically, my experience, and tell me if you've had it differently, at a minimum require about 50% of the upgrades to be paid by way of additional construction deposit, right? So if your client decides to walk away, and you being the good agent, you explain to them, yeah, no, it's not that easy. You're going to lose your $20,000 of earnest money. You're going to lose the initial construction deposit of 10% and all the 50% of the upgrades you did. It can get really spendy really fast. So just be aware of that. Okay. And the section that governs that is 2.2, right? It talks about when you have to deliver the construction deposit. And of course, they can select will or will not. Let me tell you, all your private contracts with a builder on their contracts, there is no option for will not. It's just hard coded in. You will, right? And then non-refundable, except as in Section 8, buyer acknowledges that the construction deposit to the seller shall be non-refundable. Okay, pretty straightforward. All right. You'll notice in this yellow section for settlement and closing, there's two green areas in that, and that is your prorations, right, for taxes and other things, and special assessments. So things to be aware of. If you're closing on this and it was a lot at the last time that the county assessed taxes, and in the next 6 months, they built a structure on it, make sure that the taxes for the current year, because they're going to be based on new construction, reflect that and not just the lot. Otherwise, your people are going to be stuck with an inordinate amount of taxes come November. Okay. And then the other one, just a brief reminder that in special assessments, whether it's HOA or anything else like that, I put in there in red, and don't forget PIDs. We covered that, right? PIDs. What does it stand for? Frankly, I can't remember. So Jill, did you say it?
Yeah. I was on mute. Principal, interest, and taxes. Right?
No, property or something improvement development or something like that. I should know it.
Property infrastructure development.
Say that again, Don.
Property infrastructure development.
There you go.
That's it.
There you go. Don is the man, come shining through. All right. So remember, those are the financial things that you really should be paying attention, that are kind of outside the norm of a standard REPC. The big ones are, construction deposit is part of the remedy, and that would include, in most cases, any upgrades. That's the way most contracts are written. Prorations, special assessments. Okay. No other greens. Any questions so far on the green, the financial part of it? We never came back to, I never finished out on, do we advocate, do we want our earnest money for our buyers to be held at a title company? I see some heads shaking no.
No,
Why?
No.
Why?
because if the sellers or the billers get pissed off, they can hold that money up in limbo indefinitely and not release it. Both people have to sign in order to release the money.
There you go, Deborah. That's right. So just remember
Because-
this.
Also, because if you use the state approved REPC, it throws a bunch of the REPC out of the game.
Yeah, it does.
But so I have a question now.
Wait,
So
let
up
me
in-
finish my thought, Bill, and then I'll have your question. Just
Okay.
remember this, right? When earnest money is held at our trust account, I, as the principal broker, have the right through the Division of Real Estate to release earnest money based on the terms of the contract. So, and trust me, I take that seriously. I look and I scrutinize and be like, listen, there's a clear avenue for me to release the earnest money. When it's held at a title company, just to take this a step further, the title company always has something that they have buyer and seller sign that say, we're not releasing anything unless both parties agree, right, to release it. So if somebody gets sideways, and let's say in this case, it's the builder sideways, even though it's irrational, can they hold up that earnest money? Yeah. And typically what happens with that is the title company is like, I'm not doing anything. Remember, title companies are all about avoiding lawsuits, right? And so they're going to sit there and wash their hands. And eventually, if people can't agree in writing, meaning buyer and seller, then the title company in most cases will do what they call interpleading it to the court. They pay about a $300 fee. And they say, hey, court, here's a problem. We're not equipped to deal with it. Buyer and seller now have to deal with the court. And now you're in litigation. So that's why we don't typically like, I'm not saying it doesn't have a place. Sometimes it does have a place, but typically we do not like earnest money held at a title company. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just back to the pragmatic question. I don't do that much new construction because in the area that I grew up in and that I service the most, all of that land's been built out forever. So there's none or very little. But anyways, what percentage of new construction with our office do you see with the contractor or the builder's REPC versus the new construction REPC with the state?
If I were to, I don't have that data, hard data, but if I were to spitball a number, I would say it's maybe 10 to 15% of the time we see the new construction REPC. And with that, there's always some 2-3 page addendum to basically make it their own private contract anyway, right? So, okay, let's jump into section 2, which is the property. And I'm not really so much interested about the property. Just remember, please include a tax ID. But this is the reason I'm bringing these things up is I always look at this from the perspective of if it gets sideways, is there grounds for somebody to be found in default, jeopardy, non-performance of a contract, right? That's kind of my starting premise. So if you're representing a seller, right, or the flip side, the buyer, here's some things that you're going to declare. What is the home design? You know, typically most builders, if you're with a Rye or Edge or DR Horton, they have a model number. Populate it. My gosh, we get these all the time that are kind of just left blank. That doesn't, A, it's not doing well for your client, and B, it creates ambiguity in a contract. Anytime you hear the word ambiguity with a contract, think potential problem. And when it's a potential problem, whether you prevail or not, you are going to be seen in a lesser light by your client because you made life challenging for them. And they would be saying, well, D, how come you didn't check what, or, you know, what home design it was? And we would say, because I'm lazy. I don't know. What's the good answer? What's the good answer there? There isn't one. That's the short answer. All right. So then also make sure utility services. I remember we had one years ago. I want to say it was Flagstone Homes, but I'm not sure. But guess what wasn't hooked up to the house? And this became an issue with the city as well. And eventually we prevailed, but it was a long, drawn out problem. They didn't have the public water and sewer connected, and they didn't have telephone at the time when we still, you know, used hardwired phone. And I was just like, how can you build a home and not have these things connected? Now they were stubbed, but they hadn't finished the connection, which, you know, most cities are like, if you want a C of O, you got to have the water and sewer hooked up. Anyway, just do your job and make sure you check the boxes for the utilities that should be there or that your client is expecting there. With another one we had, they said that there would be Comcast, right? They said, guess what the agent didn't check? Didn't check other Comcast, right? And that became an issue. So these are all in the category of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. All right. Let's jump down to get something more fun. Settlement and closing. The good news about settlement and closing is it really kind of takes away one of your options. If you look down here on possession, there is no option for 24 hours or 3 days or listen, when it closes, since it's not owner occupied, we're going to make it yours. So that's kind of hardwired into the contract. So that is a good thing. All right. To title, insurance, and liens. And I get it. Some of these things we have covered in our REPC classes, but I want to make sure we're aware of the differences here. So you'll notice in the title insurance section, the orange section here, is this big enough for everybody to see or should I grow it? There we go. How's that? Notice 6.3, protection against liens and civil action. Do you think that's worth paying attention to, Parker? Protection against liens and civil action. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but that sounds like that should be pretty important.
I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's fine.
Not that big of a deal. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So yeah, this is probably a section that not only should you be well versed in, but make sure your clients are aware of as well. So let's spend a minute here. Notice this first line. The owner may be protected against liens. That's the new owner, right? Against an owner-occupied reference if. Remember, always pay attention to the small words, if, and, or. Those are important words in a contract. So you may have protection against liens if what item 1 or 2 is met. So what is item 1? 1 has subcomponents, A, B, and C. So item 1 is owner entered into a written contract with with an original contractor. Have you ever had, in all of your years of history, have you ever had a builder start a job and it ends up with another builder? I have. You know, the original builder gets into trouble, and to avoid bankruptcy or something else, he brings in his buddy who's building and is more capable. And so that's not the original owner in that case. So in order for the protection to be there, It must be contract written with the original contractor. That's item number 2. Item B of that same section is, oh, they've also got to be licensed. Crazy thought. Builder has to be licensed, right? And then item C, the owner paid in full the contracting entity in accordance with the written contract. And this really bugs me that this is in here because statute of fraud applies. So I don't know why they inserted and oral amendments to the contract, but whatever. So if you do that, you've hit item number 1 and you have protection. So the second one is the amount of the general contract between the owner and the original contractor totals no more than 5,000.
Hey, sorry, Matt. Can you
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit more about oral amendments? And
I
just
can't.
explain it. I'm not.
Oh,
Okay.
you want me to explain it? I thought you were just asking if I was capable.
No. Does this mean?
Yeah.
Just correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming it says written or oral. How can we prove oral?
There's the whole discussion right there, Parker. You just nailed it on the head. How can you cover that if things got sideways and you litigate it? The reality is you can't, and that's why, especially in real estate transactions, the statute of frauds is such a big deal. Everything must be signed. Not only that, in the new construction REPC, it says if there's any changes or modifications, it must be in writing, right? So I think what they were trying to do here, maybe unintentionally, was if, I don't know, buyer goes out to the subcontractor and said, oh, I wanted a 5x5 window there and not a 4x4, and the superintendent didn't check with the builder, and yet they ended up getting a bigger window, and all of a sudden it comes to life. I don't know. I think it's stupid. I don't think that language should be there, right?
So should we record our conversations?
Deborah.
Yeah, that was my
such-
next question.
Such a good question. What the good news is, Utah is, I think, one of 9 states that is a single party consent state. So if you're talking to somebody, you can record them without their permission. I would still say it's not a good strategy. Well, it's a good strategy. It's not a good strategy. I mean, other than if somebody's going to come back at you for something that was said orally and you actually have a record, I would say anything you're doing on behalf of your client, I would always advocate for having it in writing and signed by the parties giving it, because that's actually a specific term of the contract itself. Any changes have to be in writing, signed by the parties, right? So let's follow our own contract. This should never, I've said this before on this call, you should never think, could I prevail if things went sideways? That is the wrong question. The real question is, how do I avoid ever having to prevail? That's the question. And so that answers your question. Just don't do oral things. Just make sure that you are getting everything in writing. Okay? Anyway, point being is, if you do these 2 things, you can be protected from liens and civil action in the course of your build. Okay? All right, seller's disclosures. Pretty standard, right? We think it's pretty standard, and I think most agents hear the term seller's disclosures, and I don't know why. I don't know why. A vast majority of them think it only refers to the seller property condition disclosure document. It is so much more, and especially so in new construction. Can I direct your attention to the highlighted portion? Seller's disclosures also include item E, which is written notice of any claims or conditions known to the seller relating to environmental, soil stability, drainage, or problems or other known defects to the property. What is that called in normal person's term? What is that test called? Soils test, PERT test,
Geotech.
geotech. There's a lot of names that get thrown at it. And here's what I love. All right, we're gonna diverge here for a second. We get builders all the time, and I mean all the time, that say, we're not providing seller's disclosures. And typically what they're saying is, we're not providing the seller's property condition disclosure form, right? But you need to be aware, if you're representing a buyer, if they send over an addendum or part of their contract says, we will not provide sellers disclosures, because that is a all-encompassing term. It includes all the items A through K, and that gets them off the hook to a certain degree for things like soil tech. Now, I don't know how it is in Davis County, Salt Lake County. I know in Utah County, we have some builders that love to build up on the foothills, and some of those areas just like to move on their own. And there have been several lawsuits over the years because the seller did not disclose to the buyer the perk tests and the things that were going on there. And some of that can be how far down until you hit bedrock, right? You realize that all of Utah, Salt Lake, Davis County, this was at all one point Lake Bonneville, and the foothills that we have are the old kind of like shoreline. What is the shore usually made of in the lakes that you've gone to?
Sand.
Sand.
Dirt, gushy stuff, movable stuff.
Gravel.
I mean, unless you're down at Lake Powell, which it's just rock cliffs, right? But this is why it's kind of a big deal, and that's why it's included here. Is and I would take it a step further. Where I live down in Springville, Mapleton. Mapleton is higher than the lake floor, probably by, I don't know, 50, 70, 80 feet, depending on where you are. So you would think water table is not an issue, right? The problem is you have these wonderful, beautiful mountains that the city is built right up against, and they get all this snow. And when the snow melts, I don't know, they have this thing called gravity. It tends to come down the mountain face and it hits the dirt, and then it goes underground. Where does it go from there? Anyone?
Your
Yeah.
basement.
To the basement. Yeah. Well, there's a reason why a lot of the agricultural land historically is right up against those mountains, because the water tends to create little underground aquifers of varying sorts and streams. And that's not a joke. That is legit. My brother built in Mapleton. We sold him a house, I don't know, 15 years ago. Beautiful subdivision at the time. All the houses were 800 to $1 million. So those would be closing on 2 million now. And about 70% of the homes in the subdivision, old farmland, right? But they did the development and the building during several drought years. And as soon as water returned to normal, 70% of those homes had to have French drains dug around them because they were getting water where, Deborah? In the basement.
Their basement. So should we provide geological survey maps and things? Because I sold some property. It was just bare land out in, I think, Payson or Santaquin. And it turns out there was a debris flow event 20 years ago, 20 years before my client even bought the property. And she didn't know about it. And we got this really picky structural engineer who demanded to know it. And we're like, how is she supposed to know that there was a mudslide 20 years before?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And we have a lot of different situations that are somewhat similar to that. And you hit on a key word. She is responsible to disclose things that she knows. If she doesn't know anything, then a buyer in their due diligence has every right to go in and do their own investigation, testing, soil perk, you name it, geotech. And they're responsible to pay for it, and they're responsible to put it back in the same manner that they found it. So it's kind of a double-sided answer. Is your seller required to do that proactively? No. Could they do it so that they don't have anybody even disputing it? Yeah, potentially, but then they're liable for what they didn't know originally. And I am not advocating ducking our head in the sand and say, I didn't know. But if legitimately, you literally have no record from the previous buyer, you had no reason to suspect anything, it's not your job to do all the investigating. The fundamental nature of our contract is the buyer is buying as is, and then they have the obligation for the due diligence.
What we ended up doing is that guy sent me the geological survey map, told me it had been a part of a whatever debris flow event, sent me supposedly pictures of it. I couldn't confirm or deny whether that was the lot or not, because How am I supposed to know? Didn't make sense to me. But it was a pain in the butt because when we finally sold it, because we suddenly had this information, we sent it along, but it was a pain and it kind of scared people off.
You're hitting on a leverage tactic that we use even in the residential side. You know, we go and do an inspection, and I call Parker and say, "Hey, Parker, did you know that the roof has a problem?" And he says, "Well, you know, you're buying it as is. We make no express or implied warranties." And I say, "Well, I just sent it to your email, so now you and your client are aware, and anybody else who buys, you have to disclose to them." Yeah, that's a little bit of a power play there. And sometimes that is used absolutely as a tactic to get our way as the buyers. So yeah, it can be a pain because once we become aware. Now, if somebody who is unqualified, and we've had this situation, comes in and says, "Well, there's this problem with the house." I'm like, "Do you have a license in that field? Am I required to disclose what that unlicensed individual, unqualified person said?" No, because that is them just pontificating based on a place of ignorance, and so we're not required to share that type of information. Okay, all right. So written notice of any geotech issues is E. F, water rights. We've talked about that before. I'm not going to spend time there. G, plans and specifications for the residents and copies. Oh my gosh. If the seller doesn't provide those, not, "Oh, it's on a website for you to pull down." If they don't provide it, they're in default of not giving you seller's disclosures. That's part of it. Name of the contractor and the contract's license number, always a good idea. And then here's an interesting one. You know, they've got to specify the R value, right? The insulation value that's going to be installed on each part of the house, right? So you have a different R value up in the ceiling or the roof or in the trusses, and you have different in the wall, etc. That's actually part of seller's disclosures. Did you know that? Kind of interesting. And then a builder's warranty, if different from section 11. Huh. Well, let's jump down to section 11 and see what it says. Seller warranties. This is kind of how our old REPC used to read. Unless the seller is providing an alternate builder's warranty, seller does warrant the heating, the cooling, the electrical, the plumbing, landscape sprinkler systems, gas and electric appliances, fixtures, structural elements of the residence, including the roof walls and foundation, against any defects in material and workmanship for a period of 1 year after the settlement deadline. We get this all the time, like, "Well, we want the builder to provide a home warranty." Well, it's already in the contract. I mean, if you want a third-party home warranty, that's different, but there is already, by default, a warranty from the builder already. Okay, and notice, always pay attention when you see these words. Section 11 shall survive closing. That means this is a contractual term that lives on until it no longer lives on, which would be 1 year after settlement. Okay. All right. Go to the blue section. We got 2 sections left. Buyer's condition of purchase. This is, I wrote down on my notes, this is the outs for the buyer. This is the way for them to get out of the contract. We all know the due diligence, right? And it's very similar to the standard REPC. You are going to review the seller's disclosures, which would include the plans, the insulation R value, and geotech, all those things, right? And then here's the catch-all for your buyers. And I'm dealing with a lawsuit right now for one of our agents where this verbiage comes into place, right? Now, this responsibility is on the buyer. Any other tests outside of what's in the contract, right? The buyer's agreeing that they're going to do any other tests, evaluations, and verifications of the property deemed necessary and appropriate by the buyer. And then it gives them a bunch of examples. And then the last part basically says, or the right to cancel in section I, if buyer, in the buyer's sole discretion, determines that the results of their due diligence are unacceptable, then they can either cancel, right? Or if they go on, they can resolve things in writing, but then section II is the key. if the buyer fails to cancel, they don't raise the issue, right? Even though they have carte blanche to do any and all testings, verifications, evaluations that they deem necessary. If they move past that or fail to resolve anything in writing, right, then they've deemed, here's the key words, the buyer shall be deemed to have waived the due diligence condition. So that has a specific ramification in the contract, and it also has a powerful meaning when somebody comes back and says, oh, I was wrong. I didn't know about this. That's our situation in this lawsuit. I'm not going to go into all the details, but you don't get to come in with something that is readily observable. There's nothing hidden whatsoever from the seller. You don't get to come back, the buyer is readily discoverable to the buyer. You don't get to come back later as the buyer and be like, I was wronged. I mean, when this goes to litigation, that is going to be the strong point. We will actually be reading verbatim these sections that your job was to do any and all tests, evaluations, verifications that you deemed necessary, right? And you chose not to. You just didn't do them. And now you want to make that the seller's responsibility. Going to be a hard day in court. So make sure your buyers understand that, right? We need to do every test that you feel is important to eventually buy this property, because once it's done, it's pretty hard to come back and say, I was harmed, right? Jill, fire away.
Okay. So this is just really interesting, and only coming from my own personal experience with purchasing a brand new build. And we had to use the buyer's contract or the seller's contract, so the builder's contract. And we did our due diligence, but then in order for us to continue to move forward, we had to basically waive that and trust that they were going to fix everything that we had found wrong. So let's just say they didn't, we were still stuck by it. That was about sent me over the edge.
Well, so I'm going to pick on you a little bit, Jill. When you say that we were forced to move on.
Well, we weren't forced. We wanted the house at the end of the day, right? We were like, but that's the thing, is that these contracts that the builders have are not in favor of the buyer at all. They are only in favor of them. And so I think that that's key as we represent buyers and in new builds, that we just have to make the buyers aware of that. So
I don't know. Yeah, no, this is such a great thing that you bring up. Listen, and it's actually very real world, right? I mean, the buyers want a house. They've gone through a lot of pains to save the money. Maybe they already sold the house. They're living out of the in-laws' house and all of the things that add up, right? And so the builders know this. The builders know that they've got leverage. And so they will put things in their contract unabashedly that are tilted heavily in their favor. Now, this is not a pleasant part of our job. If I'm representing you, Jill, and I'm your agent, I'd be like, listen, I know you so want this house, but we've gone down the path far enough, right, that the builder's wanting us to say, yeah, we're okay, and just trust him to do these later. Maybe we should find a way to kind of play the game with him. Right.
That's funny, because I hadn't put it in writing that they were going to fix it.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, as much as we think the builders are in the driver's seat, and you know what, if it's 2020, you're right. I mean, wild, wild freaking West. But builders right now are pretty keen on making sure that the things are under contract go through under contract. Right. And so that means we actually have some leverage ourselves. And there's always a little bit of an art form to this, right? I hope this clicks, resonates with everybody. They understand this. Don't get in a pissing match. Don't be like, well, I mean, as soon as you find yourself saying, well, you're going down the wrong path, right? You have to leverage their human nature and say, hey, super excited to get this, closed, continue it down the path, whatever it is, right? You want to stay positive. Right? Because a builder doesn't, they're not always the most sophisticated contractually. And sometimes especially smaller builders, they take things personally pretty quickly. And so quickly reaffirm, so happy to be building with XYZ. I mean, you guys are doing a great job. Hey, listen, I've got a little concern about this, right? I want to continue this moving forward, but you know, I would love to say to just we should just trust each other, but we should, is there any problem with this? Just putting these few things in, see how I'm painting this? I'm trying to diminish the pain and really what it does is it paints the builder into a corner, right? I stroked the ego. I told them we're really just asking for something reasonable. We get it in writing and it's not that big of a deal. And really it paints them into a corner to have to say, no, I'm kind of a scumbag builder and I don't want to do that. This is a probability game. I'm not saying all these things are absolute surefires, but that's my general approach. Stay on good terms. Tell me you want to refer people. Tell me you want to refer people because they see dollar signs when you say things like that. And then just say, it's probably not a big deal, but I would just feel so much better if we just captured these things in writing. And my guess, Jill, is you did something very much like that, right?
I tried.
Yeah. Okay. So good point. Try and get it in writing whenever possible. Otherwise, you are at the mercy of people just goodwill. All right, financing conditioning. I'm going to rapidly go through this.
Matt.
Yeah, go ahead, Deborah.
So do we extend the due diligence deadline till the house is built? Like, what do you do there?
Well, there's two ways. Yes, you could extend the deadline, or you could say, hey, listen, I want to move past that deadline just like you do with confidence, and I don't want to have some crazy growing list. Why don't we just capture the 5 items that are still outstanding with sufficient detail? Dan's giving me you're over time. Anyway, just see if you can capture those few things, right? The benefit to them is, especially if you articulate it, I'm not interested in an ever-growing list. Here are the 5 items that we need done. They're not big deals. Let's just get in. I've already drafted it up. If you're okay with the verbiage, I'm just going to send it over. Can you just get a signature on that? And we'll move past the deadline, right? Okay, financing condition. There's 2 components. Who's going to get the construction loan? Who isn't? It just depends on the situation. For production builders, it's almost always the builder. But there are things, I wanted to draw attention to this section, which is the cash for proof of funds. If your obligation to purchase is not conditioned on qualifying for a loan and or the permanent loan as referenced in 8.2, then the buyer has to provide proof of funds. I know that sounds crazy. I should just be able to take people's word that they have money coming out their ears. But as a builder, my dad was a builder. Yeah, I want to know that you have the money. I want documentary proof so I don't go down halfway down the build only to find out you're insolvent. And then here's the powerful language. If the seller at the seller's discretion, the seller's sole discretion is not satisfied with the proof of funds, they can cancel the contract. So you better have some solid funds if you say you're going to be cash. Okay. You guys can read these sections. There's nothing too tricky about it in regards to failure to obtain the permanent financing, other than section B is important, right? In the event of cancellation based on the buyer's failure to obtain a permanent loan, seller agrees to accept as the seller's exclusive remedy, and this is the section I was talking about, earnest money deposit and construction deposit. Okay? It's both. Last thing, and I'm going to finish on this one just for sake of time, plans, specifications, and the pre-construction meeting. How many of you in your career have attended a pre-construction meeting?
Hey, Matt.
Yeah, Parker.
Along those lines, we had talked about just going back up to the previous section where we're talking about construction deposits. I'm assuming then your advice to us would be maybe don't draft those as construction deposits if there's additional fees on top of it to protect that money.
Parker, would I advocate that when I'm looking out for my client's best interest as a buyer? Dang right I would.
Yeah. Just checking.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
I have a question on that. If you have a spec'd out home and you have a buyer that's going to purchase what's already in the plans ready to go, are they required or to pay those construction deposits for the extras on the home? Or is that?
So if it's already, a builder builds a spec home and it had upgrades already in it, right?
Yes.
No, again, pay attention to the contract. That's my starting point. But as a normal course of business, I'm making an offer at the time and the condition that the house is in, right? And so you would just want to make sure that the contract reflects that. Most builders that are doing a spec home, they already established what the upgrades were going to be before they built the spec home. Now, there's situations where a buyer fell through and then they had those specs, but they should have updated their price. That's the normal course of business.
Well, and that's that I lost I mean, I closed them on a different home in a different subdivision. But the builder, after we'd already got down and they'd made the offer, and he come back and says, "Now we just need $10,000 for these extras in the home."
Did you say, Jeff, did you say, and I want a pony?
Yeah, and I said, you know, I says, that's not, you're specking out this home already. And I says, it's already included in there, and you've given us a price on the home, but now you want him to pay the extras that are in the home already? I says, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
My buyer says, we're not doing that.
Yeah, not covered contractually. And in fact, if there was no mention of those upgrades and further costs, then he would be in default and all the remedies are available, right?
Hey,
So-
Matt, along those lines, assuming there's no C of O on a spec home, would you
Yeah.
recommend using the new construction over the standard REPC?
Yes. Yes.
There always has to be a C of O, Parker.
Well, prior to,
no-
his point is if
Yeah.
somebody is building a spec and they haven't got the C of O from the city yet, which contract should you use?
That's right.
Oh, gotcha.
All right, last section, plan
What is this?
specification.
What
and
is this? What is a CFO? Is that what you said, CFO?
No, C of O, certificate of
Oh,
occupancy.
right, yeah, because
Okay.
once that's submitted, then you use the existing REPC.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, Bill, that's just my slur. That was just my poor grammar.
All right. I'm going to finish on this point, you guys. Pre-construction meeting. Can I just take a step back from the contract here for a minute? The builder is going to do a lot of the lift, right? You can punch your client to go down to the selection. What do they call them? Your what do they call their rooms where they have all the selections? Come on, design center. Thank you. You can punt and let them go do that. Well, it's their choice. Listen, this is all about establishing your value to create a lasting relationship. If you go there and be like, listen, Parker, you're going to go in and make your own choices. If you want me to be there, I want to be there. And I can share with you what a lot of my clients have chosen and the reasons why, but ultimately you get to choose what's in your house, right? And it's going to take half an hour to drive there, half an hour back. It's going to take me an hour to 2 hours there, 3 hours to secure a client and letting them know I'm vested in what they're trying to build. And in like fashion, the pre-construction meeting. I'll give you the horror story. Had one years ago. One of my agents went through and took the route that we all raised our hand to earlier. It's like, oh, good, new construction. We'll just see how it goes. And when it came time to close, the plan had been flipped by the builder, right? And sometimes north, west, east, south directions of homes and what side the garage on are very big deals to a client. And guess what? It was a big deal in this situation. And the reason why the builder flipped the plan was because there was a utility box on one part, and he said that would have impeded, getting to the garage, this, that, and the other. It turned into a disaster, right? And people all lawyer up, and guess who's never going to refer me or the client again, right? I mean, the client's never going to refer the agent again, right? It's just bad all the way around. So take the time, tell the builder like, hey, let's just go make sure that we've got the plat the right way. And you can even tell the builder, I'm just trying to make sure my buyer knows that I've got their back. I'm there to help. I'm not going to create problems, but let's have the pre-construction meeting. Sometimes it's done on site. A lot of times it's when the excavator has already come out and painted on the dirt. Here's where the garage is. Here's where the floor plan is going to go. Great opportunity to be out there and say, yeah, that looks like, here's the plat. It looks like it's laid out the right way. By the way, what's the elevation going to be? How far out of the ground is this going to be, Mr. Builder? Right? These are all things that seem so trivial, but they can turn into disasters. And yet you can also be the hero if you're there just talking your client through it. They're like, man, I would have never thought to ask that, right? So anyway, I hope you know, this is rounding out our REPC. I promise I will not do any more REPC this year, at least not the REPC proper, because we've done the first 4 classes on REPC related stuff. But it's fundamental to what we do, guys. It really is. And you know, get your own copy, mark it up, ask me for my copy, have it available. Show your clients when you're going through it, like, here are the key areas, so they know that you're taking care of them. Pay attention to the key areas, and you'll make clients for life. I know from personal experience, and I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're sharpening your skill set, honing your craft. And I say that not as it literally has nothing to do with me, other than I know that means you're building your business the right way. And when the business becomes fun is when you've done a good enough job for people that they come back and use you. They have their kids use you. They have their neighbors use you. Not only are you making more money, but it really makes you feel good about your occupation and what you bring to the table in building great communities. So thanks for being on the call, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you.
See ya.